I'm Sebastian. 6 a.m., heart pounding from sledgehammers crashing outside, no coffee, still in yesterday's wrinkled boxers, eyes burning from no sleep. I rush out barefoot, concrete ice-cold underfoot, and see Karen Whitfield, our HOA's water tyrant, grinning in my driveway, clipboard raised like a trophy, as her crew smashes my $3,200 rainwater tanks to pieces. Metal screams. 800 gallons of clean rainwater blasts into the storm drain. She's smirking like she saved the world. It hit like a gut punch. This wasn't just cash, it was a year's hard work for our community garden. She had no idea those tanks were the only water source feeding fresh veggies to 30 seniors who can't afford groceries anymore. She just starved 30 grandparents and started a war with a quiet off-grid electrician who despises bullies. Payback's coming, you won't believe it. Stick around, this gets brutal. What's the wildest thing your HOA did to you? Drop your horror story below. Best one gets a shout out next video. 6 months ago, I thought moving to Willowbrook subdivision was smart. Turns out, I just bought a front row seat to Karen Whitfield's personal dictatorship. I'm Sebastian, divorced electrician who traded a cheating wife for a 3-bedroom ranch and the dream of growing decent tomatoes. My grandfather survived the Dust Bowl by hoarding every raindrop. When I saw Texas lets you collect rainwater legally, I knew my first project. 3 months building an 800-gallon system. Custom gutters, food-grade tanks, first flush diverter to dump dirty runoff, UV sterilization because I'm not some backyard amateur. The metallic ping of rain hitting aluminum, the satisfying click of PVC connections, the fresh smell of new plastic, cost me $3,200 and 80 weekend hours of pure satisfaction. Knowledge nugget. Texas Water Code Section 11.101 makes rainwater harvesting a legal right. Translation: HOAS can legally kiss your rain barrels. Here's where I got sneaky. Behind our mailboxes sits 2 acres of community garden feeding 30 seniors who choose between pills and produce every month. Beverly Palmer, retired teacher, runs this operation where folks harvest enough vegetables to save $40 weekly on groceries. The earthy scent of wet mulch mixed with the distant hum of my UV sterilizer created this perfect evening soundtrack. So I buried 100 feet of PVC from my system to their plots. Anonymous water supply, no credit needed. For 2 years, my ugly tanks secretly provided 70% of their irrigation. Mrs. Patterson grows tomatoes because fresh vegetables help control her diabetes. Mr. Rodriguez's peppers keep his arthritis manageable. These aren't hobbies, they're survival. Then Karen noticed my barrels. Picture a real estate agent who treats property values like gospel, lives in a 4,500 square foot beige monument, and considers herself the neighborhood's aesthetic police. Karen Whitfield, HOA president for 6 years, destroyer of solar panels, killer of swing sets, and professional pain in everyone's ass. But here's what I learned later. Karen's not just power hungry, she's financially desperate. Her husband's dental practice owes $180,000 in back taxes. Their McMansion is mortgaged at 95% value. She targets residents with environmental improvements because she believes eco-friendly features attract the wrong kind of people and hurt property values. Her weapon? Selective rule enforcement. Native plants become fire hazards. Solar installations become aesthetic violations. She forced one neighbor to remove panels that faced north, panels that couldn't possibly create glare. The pattern was clear. Green technology equals target. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday, paper crisp with legal menace. Notice of aesthetic violation. My rainwater system violated visual harmony standards. $200 daily fine starting immediately. 48 hours to comply. I showed up to the next board meeting armed with permits, state water codes, and photos of identical systems. Karen sat behind her folding table throne, flanked by 2 neutered board members, examining her nails like she was dismissing a parking ticket. County permits don't matter, she declared. HOA covenants supersede local regulations. These industrial containers damage property values and attract undesirable elements. The bitter taste of cheap meeting room coffee mixed with my rising anger as a dozen neighbors watched this performance. That's when Karen made her fatal error. She got personal. Maybe this will teach you to think twice about your hippie science projects. Some residents need to learn their place in this community. Dead silence. Even her lapdog board members shifted uncomfortably. Karen had just revealed her true motivation. This wasn't about aesthetics. This was about putting the uppity new guy in his place. She'd picked a fight with someone who'd spent 20 years troubleshooting problems. Walking to my truck, humid night air carried the sweet scent of tomato plants from the garden she'd never noticed. Those plants were about to die, 30 seniors about to go hungry, all because Karen couldn't stand someone actually helping their community. She thought she was teaching me about knowing my place. Instead, she'd just enrolled in a master class on consequences. Karen thought certified letters would scare me into compliance. She underestimated how stubborn an electrician gets when someone threatens his work. I spent the next morning researching, and what I found made me smile for the first time since this mess started. Turns out my grandfather wasn't the only one who understood water rights. The state of Texas does too. I'd read about the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality encouraging rainwater harvesting, but diving deeper into the legal code was like finding buried treasure. State environmental law doesn't just protect residential water collection. It actively overrides local regulations, including HOA covenants. Karen's legal threat was about as enforceable as a chocolate teapot, but she doubled down anyway. Day 2 of my supposed compliance period, Karen showed up at my door with backup, 2 board members flanking her like discount Secret Service agents. The morning sun blazed down while she waved a folder thick with official-looking papers, the crisp rustle of documents mixing with the distant hum of my UV sterilizer still running. "Mr. Hayes, we're prepared to file an injunction if you don't remove these containers immediately," she announced, loud enough for my neighbors to hear. "The association has consulted with legal counsel." I almost laughed. "What legal counsel? Your cousin who does divorce law?" Her face flushed red, clashing with her perfectly coordinated beige outfit. "The firm of Mitchell, Brennan and Associates specializes in property disputes. They've assured us that aesthetic covenants take precedence over your supposed water rights." Any lawyer worth their bar card would tell Karen she was headed for a lawsuit she couldn't win, but I kept that thought to myself. Better to let her keep digging. That's when I realized this wasn't just about rules. Karen was targeting me personally. The acrid smell of hot concrete mixed with my growing understanding of her game. "You know what's interesting, Karen?" I pulled out my phone and started recording. "You've never complained about Jim's above-ground pool, which violates the exact same aesthetic standards, or Patricia's solar panels, which are way more visible than my water barrels." Her backup board members suddenly found their shoes fascinating. "Those are different situations," Karen stammered. "Different how? Because Jim and Patricia don't challenge your authority?" Then her mask slipped completely, the moment that changed everything. "Listen, Mr. Hayes, this community has certain standards. We can't have everyone thinking they can install whatever industrial equipment they want. Some residents need to understand their place here." There it was. Pure, unfiltered control freak talking. That afternoon, I drove through the subdivision documenting every covenant violation Karen had ignored. Satellite dishes bigger than small cars, boats parked in driveways, garden sheds that clearly exceeded size limits. The pattern was obvious. Karen enforced rules like a dictator selectively and personally. Meanwhile, the community garden was dying. Without my water supply, Beverly and the seniors were hand-watering with buckets from home. I watched Mrs. Patterson, 78 with arthritis, struggling to carry a gallon jug to her tomato plants. Her gnarled hands shook under the weight, and the sight made my chest tight with rage. Karen was hurting vulnerable people to prove a point. That evening, I filed a formal complaint with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. TCEQ takes water rights violations seriously, especially when HOAs try to override state law. But I also started digging into Karen herself. Public records are beautiful when you know where to look. Karen's real estate license showed 3 ethical complaints in 2 years, all dismissed, but the pattern was telling. Her husband's dental practice had a $180,000 tax lien filed 6 months ago. Their McMansion was refinanced twice in 3 years. The woman wasn't just power hungry, she was broke. Karen's next move came 48 hours later, a citation on my door for excessive landscaping water usage during drought restrictions. Completely fabricated since my system actually conserved city water, but she was throwing everything hoping something would stick. The metallic taste of anger mixed with the sweet scent of my evening tomatoes as I realized Karen's real game. She wasn't just trying to remove my water barrels, She was establishing precedent that she could override state law whenever it suited her agenda. That night, I called Beverly Palmer and told her everything. The buried water line, Karen's threats, the crisis facing the garden. Beverly's voice went quiet before she spoke. Sebastian, 30 families depend on this garden. Mrs. Rodriguez hasn't afforded fresh vegetables since her husband died. Mr. Thompson's diabetes medication costs so much he lives on canned soup. This isn't a hobby, it's survival. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. This wasn't about property rights anymore. Karen had declared war on the most vulnerable people in our community. The next morning, I started phase 2 of my counterattack. Time to show Karen what happens when you mess with an electrician who really doesn't like bullies. Karen's social warfare began when my neighbor Jim mentioned that several residents were asking about my dangerous water hoarding operation. Dangerous water hoarding, like I was some doomsday prepper, instead of legally collecting rainwater that would otherwise flood storm drains. Karen had weaponized the neighborhood gossip network with surgical precision. Real estate agents know how to plant doubt. A whispered concern here, a raised eyebrow there. Suddenly, my environmentally responsible system became a public menace breeding mosquitoes, attracting rats, and threatening property values. The rumors got wonderfully creative. One claimed I was running an illegal car wash. Another suggested my tanks were contaminating groundwater. The smell of fresh-cut grass mixed with my growing realization that Karen was playing a much deeper psychological game than simple rule enforcement. At the next board meeting, she unveiled her masterpiece, an emergency safety assessment, complete with PowerPoint slides of mosquito larvae and disease vectors. The association has a responsibility to protect residents from health hazards, Karen announced, clicking through stock photos like she was delivering a CDC briefing instead of targeting one guy's rain barrels. I'd done enough electrical work in swampy Louisiana to know mosquito control. My system was sealed, covered, treated with mosquito dunks. Textbook perfect. But Karen wasn't selling facts. She was selling fear. Then came her nuclear option. The board has voted to authorize emergency removal at the homeowner's expense due to liability concerns. That's when something clicked. Karen had never researched what my system actually fed. She power-walked past the community garden twice weekly but never connected those thriving vegetables to my problematic barrels. Most HOA tyrants at least investigate before destroying things. Karen was operating on pure spite and assumptions. The next morning brought her escalation. A county code inspector at my door, looking apologetic. Someone filed a health hazard complaint about unpermitted water collection, he explained. I have to inspect. 15 minutes later, he was shaking his head in disbelief. My system exceeded every safety standard, proper first flush diverters, UV sterilization, sealed storage. He'd inspected hundreds of setups. Mine was textbook perfect. Whoever filed this wasted everyone's time, he said, filling out his report. Your system's safer than municipal water. Mind sharing who reported you? I handed him Karen's business card. The inspector's face shifted to weary recognition. Oh, her. 4th bogus complaint this month. Lady thinks code enforcement is her personal harassment service. But here's where Karen made her fatal miscalculation. She never considered what happened when my water stopped flowing. That afternoon, the community garden hit catastrophic failure. Week 2 without irrigation had killed 60% of the crops. Beverly was coordinating bucket brigades, but 70-year-old seniors couldn't maintain 2 acres of vegetables. The acrid smell of dying tomato plants mixed with the cruel irony of Karen's sprinkler system running full blast next door. Then Mrs. Patterson collapsed, carrying water to her plants. Heat exhaustion, dehydration, overexertion. As paramedics loaded her into the ambulance, I caught Karen watching from her window before quickly shutting the blinds. The metallic slam of the ambulance doors echoed through the subdivision like a gunshot. That evening, everything changed with 2 phone calls. Janet Morrison, retired city council member, had been quietly watching this drama unfold. When I explained the situation, legal water system, harassment campaign, seniors going hungry, her voice went ice cold. Sebastian, what Karen's doing isn't just wrong, it's illegal. Board members have fiduciary duties to act in good faith. Personal targeting while ignoring real violations? That's textbook bad faith governance with serious legal consequences. Tom Henderson, our subdivision's plumber, was equally direct. Karen picked the wrong fight. State environmental law has real teeth. Keep documenting. This lady's about to learn an expensive lesson about water rights. But the real game changer came from an unexpected source. Beverly Palmer called at midnight, voice shaking with a mixture of grief and rage. Sebastian, Mrs. Rodriguez is in the hospital. Malnutrition complications from not being able to afford fresh vegetables since the garden died. She's 83 years old and choosing between blood pressure medication and food because Karen Whitfield thinks your water barrels are ugly. The phone felt heavy in my hand as the full weight of Karen's ignorance hit me. She'd declared war on a food source keeping seniors alive, and she didn't even know it existed. By morning, I had documentation that would destroy Karen's professional reputation, personal finances, and iron grip on our subdivision. She'd wanted to teach me about knowing my place. Time to show her exactly where bullies belong, at the bottom of a very deep legal hole. Phase 2 of my counterattack was about to begin, and Karen had no idea what was coming. Karen's desperation hit peak absurdity when she filed 3 code enforcement complaints in 1 week, each more ridiculous than the last. Monday. My electrical work was unpermitted and dangerous. Yet the same inspector who'd praised my water system now looked genuinely pissed checking my perfectly legal circuits. Every wire was code compliant, properly grounded, with permits dating back years. Tuesday, my rainwater collection violated drought restrictions. The inspector actually laughed at this one. Collection systems help conserve water during droughts, not waste it. Wednesday, I was operating commercial agriculture because my tomatoes were suspiciously large for residential use. Lady, file another bogus complaint and we start charging you for harassment, the inspector warned Karen when she showed up to supervise his third pointless visit. But Karen's tunnel vision was about to cost her everything. That morning, Beverly called with a voice cracking from exhaustion. Sebastian, we lost it all. The entire harvest is gone. 75% crop failure. 2 seasons of work destroyed because Karen thought my barrels were ugly. The acrid smell of decomposing vegetables mixed with the sight of elderly people staring at their dead plants like mourners at a funeral. Here's what Karen's obsession blinded her to. She was being watched by someone with serious legal teeth. Janet Morrison had been building a case file that would make prosecutors weep with joy. Every frivolous complaint documented. Every ignored HOA violation photographed while Karen targeted my legal system. Every discriminatory statement recorded and time-stamped. Karen's not just harassing you, Janet explained over coffee, spreading evidence across the table like a winning poker hand. She's creating massive personal liability for herself and the HOA board. The documentation was surgical in its precision. Selective enforcement patterns, bad faith governance, discriminatory targeting. But Janet's crown jewel made me grin. The original 1987 HOA charter requiring environmental stewardship and water conservation. This subdivision was marketed as eco-friendly before developers realized beige conformity sold better, Janet said, tapping the laminated document. Karen's not just violating your rights, she's violating the HOA's founding charter. Meanwhile, the human carnage kept mounting. Mrs. Rodriguez remained hospitalized with malnutrition complications. Mr. Thompson's diabetes spiked without fresh vegetables. The metallic beep of medical monitors mixed with Beverly's tears as she updated me on each senior's declining health. That's when Karen played her most desperate card, attempted bribery. Thursday morning, an envelope on my doorstep. No signature, just Karen's business card and a handwritten note. Perhaps we can resolve this professionally. Her office reeked of artificial vanilla and panic when I arrived. She'd staged this like a corporate negotiation, complete with coffee service and her Realtor of the Month plaques desperately displayed for credibility. Sebastian, I think we started off wrong, she began, forcing charm like squeezing toothpaste from an empty tube. I have a solution benefiting everyone. Her offer was breathtaking in its audacity. Remove my water system voluntarily, receive $2,000 in aesthetic improvement reimbursement, plus guaranteed immunity from future violations for reasonable landscaping. Consider it a fresh start, Karen said, sliding pre-written paperwork across her desk with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. The agreement included a gag clause preventing discussion of past disagreements. Clear attempt to silence me about her harassment campaign. I pretended to study the contract while savoring the moment. This seems generous, Karen, but I'm curious. What happens to the community garden when my water system disappears? Her face went completely blank. What community garden? Perfect. Absolutely perfect. The garden behind the mailboxes, Karen. 2 acres feeding 30 seniors who can't afford both medication and groceries. The color drained from her face like water from a broken tank as the full scope of her ignorance crashed down. I thought that was just decorative landscaping, she whispered. Decorative landscaping that kept Mrs. Rodriguez alive. Landscaping that managed Mr. Thompson's diabetes. Landscaping you murdered because my rain barrels offended your aesthetic sensibilities. I stood up, leaving her bribery agreement untouched. Thanks for the confession, Karen. This conversation's been remarkably educational. The walk to my truck felt like floating. Behind me, I could hear Karen's world imploding as she realized she'd just admitted to destroying a community lifeline out of pure, willful ignorance. But her biggest shock was still coming. That afternoon, Janet called with news that would turn Karen's attempted bribery into the final nail in her professional coffin. The State Environmental Enforcement Office is opening a formal investigation, Janet said, barely containing her excitement. Someone with serious legal standing filed a complaint about HOA interference with protected water rights. Someone? Beverly Palmer. Turns out retired teachers know how to research environmental law. Karen just tried bribing you the same day the state started investigating her for violating the Texas Water Code. Game, set, match. Karen had no idea the walls were closing in. Janet Morrison's 7 a.m. call made my coffee go cold. Sebastian, you need to see this. Now. Courthouse, 30 minutes. The Harris County Records Office reeked of old paper and broken dreams, but Janet's discovery was worth dragging my ass out of bed early. She had documents spread across the research table like evidence at a murder trial. Look at this beauty, Janet said, tapping the original 1987 HOA charter. Article 7, Section 3. All water conservation efforts shall be encouraged and protected as essential environmental stewardship. The words hit like a sledgehammer to the gut. Karen hadn't just been harassing me, she'd been violating the HOA's foundational law while sitting in the president's chair. It gets better, Janet continued, sliding another document forward. 1994 amendment attempt to weaken environmental protections. Required 75% resident approval. Vote failed spectacularly. These aren't guidelines, Sebastian. They're legally binding covenants Karen can't touch. My hands started shaking as the implications crashed over me. Every solar panel removal, every environmental harassment, every threat against my water system, all illegal under the HOA's own charter. But Janet wasn't done destroying my worldview. Texas Environmental Code Section 373.042, she said, showing me her phone screen. When board members knowingly violate environmental law, they become personally liable for damages, not HOA insurance, their personal assets. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead while I processed this. Personal liability, Karen's house, her savings, her future, all on the table. Then Janet dropped the nuclear bomb. I ran financials on our dear president. Her husband's dental practice faces asset seizure in 38 days. They owe $180,000 in back taxes, house mortgaged at 97%. Karen's drowning in debt and getting desperate. The pieces clicked together like a perfectly wired circuit. The harassment, the escalation, the obsession with my water barrels. Karen was fighting for her financial survival. But here's the part that'll make you sick, Janet said, producing a contract that made my vision blur with rage. Karen's real estate firm holds exclusive development rights for any HOA common areas that become available for sale. The community garden, 2 acres worth $250,000 in commission at current market rates. Kill the garden, claim it's a failed liability, get board approval for development, and Karen saves her house. The taste of copper filled my mouth as I realized what Karen had been doing. Systematically destroying the garden's water supply wasn't ignorance. It was calculated murder for profit. She'd been starving seniors to pay her mortgage. She knew, I whispered. She knew the whole time. Gets worse. Beverly's environmental complaint triggered a state investigation. If they prove Karen knowingly violated the charter for personal financial gain, criminal fraud charges, plus personal liability for every senior who ended up hospitalized because she killed their food source. We're talking hundreds of thousands in damages, potential jail time, and complete professional destruction. The courthouse felt like it was spinning as the magnitude of Karen's exposure hit me. She'd gambled everything on keeping the community ignorant about their legal rights. Janet pulled out one final folder, thick with photographs. Every HOA violation Karen's ignored while targeting your legal water system. Satellite dishes, unpermitted additions, commercial vehicles. She's been trading blind eyes for board votes. I opened the folder and started counting violations. By page 3, my grin felt predatory. How many? Janet asked. 47 documented violations she's ignored while claiming my legal water system violates aesthetic standards. Janet's smile was pure shark. Sebastian, Karen Whitfield just handed us enough evidence to destroy her professionally, personally, and criminally. Outside, storm clouds were gathering, promising the kind of rain that would fill my illegal water barrels, if I still had them. Karen was about to learn what happens when you corner a man who's got nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Sleep was impossible. My brain buzzed like live wire, connecting all the pieces Janet had laid out. By 3 a.m., I was hunched over my kitchen table with a legal pad sketching Karen's complete annihilation. The coffee was cold, but the plan was hot. 3 phases: legal demolition, physical fortress, social warfare. Each designed to hit Karen where she thought she was untouchable. Janet Morrison was already weaponizing the legal system. Her ethics complaint to the Texas Real Estate Commission would destroy Karen's license for using her HOA position to profit from community property development. Real estate agents who pull that shit don't just lose licenses. They face criminal fraud charges. The regulatory investigators are going to love this, Janet had said, grinning like a shark smelling blood. Karen handed us a textbook case of abuse of fiduciary duty. But I wanted more than Karen's professional death. I wanted her to watch her perfect little kingdom crumble in real time. Phase 2 was rebuilding my water system, but this time with enough technology to make NASA jealous. The new design would collect 1,200 gallons with cellular monitoring that uploaded data every hour. Flow rates, water quality, usage patterns, everything documented with court-admissible timestamps. The hardware store at Sunrise smelled like sawdust and revenge as I loaded PVC pipes and monitoring equipment. Tom Henderson met me there, practically vibrating with excitement. "Sebastian, this setup's going to be absolutely bulletproof," Tom said, studying my sketches over steam from his coffee cup. "Solar-powered pumps, automatic pH monitoring, backup power systems. When you're done, this'll be the most advanced water collection system in Texas." The electrical work was straightforward: motion sensors disguised as birdhouses, floodlights triggered by movement, cameras that would make Karen famous on YouTube if she tried anything stupid. 3 separate cloud backups meant her lawyer couldn't subpoena away the evidence. If Karen wanted to destroy my property again, she'd do it in 4K resolution with surround sound. But the real masterstroke was enlisting Beverly Palmer in social warfare. "Karen thinks residents are sheep," Beverly explained as we planned our door-to-door campaign, her teacher's instincts still sharp as razor wire. "She's counting on ignorance about legal rights. But when seniors start sharing stories about choosing between heart medication and vegetables while Karen profits from their hunger, that ignorance evaporates." Beverly had a list of every household, voting history, and personal grievances against Karen's rule. The canvas would connect Karen's financial conflicts to real human suffering while educating residents about their environmental rights under the original charter. Most importantly, it would reveal Karen's election manipulation. Buried in state statutes was a requirement for proper notice of HOA elections. Karen had been scheduling votes during weekday mornings when working residents couldn't attend, ensuring only her retired allies participated. This year would be different. Saturday afternoon, maximum turnout, with 15 angry candidates ready to run against her hand-picked board. By Wednesday, my backyard looked like a military installation. The new water system gleamed in morning sunlight, solar panels powering monitoring equipment that would turn any sabotage attempt into felony charges with video evidence. Tom arrived with coffee and the final components: cellular transmission units that looked like science fiction. "If someone breathes on this wrong, you'll get alerts with GPS coordinates and HD video," he said, programming the system parameters. "This thing's more secure than Fort Knox." But the real weapon was what happened next. Thursday afternoon, I reconnected the garden's water supply. The buried PVC line hummed back to life, carrying 400 gallons of precious water to to plots that had been dying for weeks. The earthy scent of wet soil mixed with the excited chatter of seniors discovering their vegetables were going to survive. Mrs. Patterson cried when her tomato plants straightened up after their first drink in 3 weeks. The metallic taste of satisfaction mixed with the sweet smell of recovering basil as 30 elderly faces lit up with hope. "Sebastian," Beverly whispered, watching the garden come back to life, "Karen has no idea what's coming." That evening, Janet stopped by to review our legal arsenal. The ethics complaint was filed, environmental investigators scheduled interviews for Monday, and election notices were ready for distribution. "Look at this," she said, pointing to my monitoring system's real-time display showing water flow, pressure, and usage statistics. When Karen tries her next move, we'll have documentation that would make a forensic accountant weep with joy. The trap was perfect. Motion sensors, cameras, legal documentation, community organization, and a water system that would keep the garden alive while collecting evidence of any interference. Karen had declared war on the wrong electrician. Now she was about to discover what happens when someone fights back with preparation, documentation, and the fury of 30 seniors who'd been choosing between medicine and food. The sun set over my technological fortress while storm clouds gathered on the horizon, promising rain for my beautiful, monitored, legally protected water collection system. Time to see if Karen was stupid enough to spring the trap. Karen's desperation hit nuclear levels when she tried bribing Tom Henderson with cash in a diner booth. "Sebastian, you're not going to believe this shit," Tom called while I was calibrating my final camera sensor. "Karen just offered me $5,000 to lie about your water system." I nearly dropped my screwdriver. "Please tell me you recorded it." "Every goddamn word. She wanted me to find code violations that don't exist, then testify that your system was dangerous. When I said it was the cleanest installation in Texas, she got desperate." Tom's voice turned dark. "She started talking about property values and attracting the wrong kind of people. Then she slipped up big time, told me about her development plans for the garden. Said once she eliminates the vegetable eyesore, her firm could build luxury townhomes worth $250,000 commission." The audio file Tom sent was pure gold. Karen confessing to destroying a community food source for personal profit while serving as HOA president. Janet would have orgasms over this evidence. But Karen's panic was accelerating into something dangerous. Friday morning brought her most desperate gambit yet. She'd filed an emergency city complaint claiming my monitoring system was illegal residential surveillance that violated neighbor privacy rights. The code inspector looked exhausted when he arrived for his 4th bogus call in 2 weeks. "Sir, this is straight-up harassment now. Your system's better installed than most commercial buildings." When Karen showed up to supervise, the inspector's professional courtesy died. "Ma'am, those cameras only monitor his property. Filing false reports is a misdemeanor. Continue this pattern and we press charges." Karen's face went nuclear red, but she doubled down. "That equipment is industrial surveillance. He's spying on the entire neighborhood." Wrong move. The inspector walked my property perimeter, documenting every camera angle. Each lens focused solely on my water system, textbook legal security installation. "Ma'am, everything here's compliant. File another bogus complaint and you're getting cited for abuse of city services." That's when Karen made her fatal error. She called an emergency board meeting for that evening. The mini twist: Karen thought she could ram through an emergency resolution condemning my system with minimal witnesses. What she got was 15 pissed-off residents Beverly had secretly organized, including the seniors whose health had collapsed during the garden crisis. The community center reeked of cheap coffee and Karen's desperation as she tried maintaining authority from her folding table throne. Her voice cracked with stress. "The board has received multiple complaints about industrial equipment in residential zones." "What industrial equipment?" Mrs. Patterson interrupted, still pale from her recent hospitalization. "You mean the water barrels that kept my tomatoes alive?" Karen's prepared speech disintegrated. "The association has liability concerns about unauthorized water collection." "Unauthorized?" Janet Morrison stood up like an avenging angel, legal folder thick with evidence. "According to the original HOA charter, Article 7, Section 3, all water conservation efforts shall be encouraged and protected. Karen, you've been violating our founding documents for months." I watched Karen's world implode in real time as Janet read the environmental stewardship requirements Karen had trampled while targeting my legal system. Furthermore, Janet continued with surgical precision, state environmental investigators interview residents Monday about HOA interference with protected water rights. Personal liability for board members starts at $5,000 per violation and escalates to $50,000 for willful violations. Karen's hands shook as she processed the financial devastation heading toward her already broke household. But the knockout punch came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Rodriguez stood slowly, her voice carrying 83 years of dignity and recent medical trauma. I spent 3 days in the hospital choosing between heart medication and food. That garden was my lifeline. You murdered it because water barrels offended your eyes. The silence was deafening. Karen's lip trembled as the human cost of her greed stared back at her. My counter-move. The election's in 2 weeks. Time for leadership that actually reads the documents they're supposed to uphold. Karen fled like her ass was on fire, abandoning her board members to face 15 furious residents demanding answers. But Karen's biggest mistake was yet to come. That night, she made one final desperate play, a move so stupid it would hand me everything I needed to destroy her completely. My motion sensors triggered at 2:47 a.m., flooding my backyard with LED brilliance, while cameras recorded in crystal clear HD. Karen Whitfield, HOA president and real estate professional, was creeping around my water system with a crowbar. The cellular alerts woke me instantly. I watched from my bedroom window as Karen attempted to damage my monitoring equipment, apparently believing she could eliminate the evidence of her harassment campaign. What she didn't realize was that every motion, every attempt at vandalism, was being uploaded to 3 cloud servers in real time with GPS coordinates and timestamps. Karen had just committed felony criminal mischief on camera while under investigation for environmental violations and real estate fraud. Game over. The police arrived at 3:15 a.m. to find Karen crouched behind my water tanks like a raccoon caught in garbage cans. Officer Martinez looked exhausted as he reviewed the crystal-clear footage on my phone. Karen Whitfield, real estate agent and HOA president, attacking my monitoring equipment with a crowbar while muttering about illegal surveillance. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for criminal mischief," Martinez said wearily as Karen sputtered excuses about protecting the community from dangerous equipment. The metallic click of handcuffs mixed with Karen's increasingly hysterical protests as neighbors emerged from their houses to witness their HOA president's perp walk. Cell phones recorded everything, while Karen's perfectly coiffed hair caught the rotating red and blue lights. "This is a setup," Karen screamed as Martinez guided her into the patrol car. "He's been harassing me for months." The irony was delicious. Karen claiming harassment while being arrested for literally vandalizing my property at 3 a.m., but her arrest was just the beginning of her complete meltdown. Saturday morning brought Karen's bail hearing, where she appeared looking like she'd been hit by a freight train. Her lawyer, clearly overwhelmed by the mountain of evidence, tried arguing that Karen was defending community safety standards. The judge wasn't buying it. "Ms. Whitfield, you're charged with criminal mischief against legal property improvements that were repeatedly verified by city inspectors. This appears to be harassment, not community service." Bail set at $5,000. Money Karen's financially destroyed household could barely scrape together. While Karen dealt with criminal charges, the community was organizing her professional execution. Beverly Palmer had transformed into a grassroots campaign general, coordinating door-to-door visits that revealed the full scope of Karen's corruption. The story was spreading like wildfire. HOA president arrested for vandalizing water system that fed hungry seniors. 43 households have signed the petition demanding Karen's immediate resignation, Beverly reported during our Sunday strategy meeting. The state environmental investigators want to interview her about deliberate interference with protected water rights. But Karen's desperation drove her to one final catastrophically stupid gambit. Monday morning, she held an unauthorized press conference outside the subdivision entrance, presumably hoping to control the narrative before it spiraled further out of control. "I've been targeted by a vindictive resident who refuses to follow community standards," Karen announced to 2 local news reporters and a handful of curious neighbors. "This man's illegal industrial equipment poses safety risks that the HOA has a duty to address." I watched the press conference from my truck, recording every word while Karen dug her grave deeper. "The truth is," Karen continued, her voice rising with desperation, "some residents think environmental rules don't apply to them. They believe they can install whatever dangerous equipment they want without consequences." One reporter asked the obvious question, Ms. Whitfield, city inspectors have repeatedly certified this water collection system as legal and safe. How do you respond to charges that you've been harassing the homeowner? Karen's mask slipped completely. Property values in this community depend on maintaining standards. We can't have every hippie with a hardware store fantasy thinking they can turn residential areas into industrial zones. The racist and classist undertones weren't subtle. Karen had just provided sound bites that would destroy her credibility with anyone possessing basic human decency. But her fatal error was what came next. Furthermore, Karen declared, apparently forgetting she was being recorded, the so-called community garden these people are defending is an eyesore that attracts undesirable elements. My firm has development plans that would benefit everyone by replacing failed landscaping with appropriate housing. Boom. Karen had just confessed on camera to destroying a community food source for personal financial gain while serving as HOA president. The reporters exchanged glances that screamed, "Holy shit, this story just got huge." That evening, Karen's press conference aired on local news with devastating commentary. The story positioned her as a corrupt HOA tyrant who deliberately starved seniors to profit from real estate development. HOA president arrested after targeting water system that fed hungry seniors, ran as the lead story, complete with interviews of hospitalized elderly residents and footage of Karen's 3 a.m. vandalism attempt. My phone buzzed with a text from Janet. Ethics complaint approved for full investigation. Real estate license suspended pending criminal trial. Karen's finished professionally. But the community wasn't done with their revenge. Tuesday brought the coup de grace. 30 seniors organized a water blessing ceremony around my rebuilt system, complete with local media coverage and statements about how rainwater collection had saved their lives during the garden crisis. Mrs. Rodriguez, recently released from the hospital, stood at my monitoring station with tears streaming down her face. This system gave us hope when we had nothing. Karen tried to kill that hope for money. The sweet scent of recovering vegetables mixed with the satisfied hum of my water pumps as the community reclaimed their narrative from Karen's lies. Election day was 5 days away, and Karen's political career was already dead and buried. Election Saturday arrived like Christmas morning for everyone who'd suffered under Karen's reign of suburban terror. The community center buzzed with energy I'd never seen before. 78 residents lined up to vote compared to the usual 12 of Karen's cronies. The metallic scrape of folding chairs mixed with excited conversations as neighbors who'd never spoken were bonding over shared Karen horror stories. Beverly Palmer had organized poll watchers to ensure no last-minute shenanigans, while Janet Morrison monitored compliance with state election laws that Karen had been violating for years. Karen arrived at noon looking like a ghost of her former self. No makeup, wrinkled clothes, and the hollow-eyed desperation of someone watching their world collapse in real time. Her usual entourage of bored lackeys was notably absent. Even they'd abandoned the sinking ship. The first shock came when vote counting began publicly, as required by law but ignored during Karen's previous election manipulations. Board Position 1, announced the volunteer counter. Karen Whitfield, 18 votes. Maria Santos, 60 votes. The community center erupted in applause as Karen's stranglehold on the presidency evaporated. But the massacre was just beginning. Board Position 2, Karen's nominee Rebecca Torres, 15 votes. Tom Henderson, 63 votes. More cheers. Karen's face went ashen as she realized the scope of her defeat. By the time all 5 positions were counted, Karen's entire slate had been obliterated by margins exceeding 70%. The board that had enabled her harassment campaign for years was completely eliminated. But Karen's humiliation wasn't finished. As the new board members were sworn in, Janet Morrison stood up with a thick folder containing months of documentation. Before we conclude today's proceedings, Janet announced, the community needs to understand the full scope of corruption we've just voted out of office. Janet's presentation was surgical in its precision. Every ignored violation while Karen targeted my legal water system. Every ethical breach, every abuse of authority, every instance of selective enforcement that violated the HOA's founding charter. Karen Whitfield didn't just harass one resident, Janet concluded. She systematically violated her fiduciary duties while profiting from community property development. This wasn't governance, it was organized theft. The crowd's angry murmurs turned to demands for accountability as the magnitude of Karen's corruption became clear. That's when Karen made her final, catastrophic mistake. "You people don't understand the sacrifices I made for this community," Karen screamed, standing up and pointing accusingly at the residents who just fired her. "I protected your property values from environmental extremists and undesirable elements." The room went dead silent as Karen's racist mask fell away completely. "That illegal water system attracted the wrong kind of people," Karen continued, apparently unaware that local news cameras were still rolling from the morning's election coverage. "The garden was failing anyway. My development plans would have benefited everyone." Mrs. Rodriguez stood up slowly, supported by her walking cane and the righteous fury of 83 years. "Karen Whitfield, you tried to kill me for money. I chose between heart medication and food because you murdered my vegetables." The confrontation was being broadcast live as Karen faced the human cost of her greed. "You don't understand," Karen shrieked, completely losing control. "That garden was costing the community money. My development contract would have made you rich while seniors starved," interrupted Dr. Patricia Webb, the retired physician who documented the medical consequences of Karen's actions. 3 hospitalizations, 15 cases of malnutrition, $47,000 in preventable medical bills, all because you couldn't tolerate the sight of water barrels. The news cameras captured every word as Karen's corruption and its human cost were laid bare before the entire community. "This is harassment," Karen screamed, backing toward the exit as 78 residents stared at her with undisguised contempt. "I'll sue all of you for defamation." "With what lawyer?" Janet asked calmly. "Your real estate license is suspended, your husband's practice is bankrupt, and you're facing criminal charges for vandalism and environmental violations." Karen fled the community center like her ass was on fire, but the damage was done. Local news had footage of a racist HOA tyrant admitting to destroying a food source that kept seniors alive. The evening broadcast led with HOA tyrant's racist rant after overwhelming election defeat, complete with Karen's confession about profiting from garden development and her vile comments about undesirable elements. Standing in my backyard that night, listening to the satisfied hum of my monitoring systems and breathing the sweet scent of recovering tomato plants, I realized Karen had given me the perfect ending. 6 months later, I'm standing in the most beautiful community garden in Texas watching Mrs. Rodriguez harvest tomatoes the size of softballs while my water system hums contentedly in the background. The transformation has been incredible. The new HOA board immediately passed the Environmental Bill of Rights, protecting all water conservation efforts, solar installations, and sustainable landscaping. My rainwater collection system became the model for subdivision-wide water conservation, with 12 neighbors installing their own systems using my design. The garden expanded to 4 acres after the board voted unanimously to purchase the adjacent lot that Karen's development firm had been eyeing. Instead of luxury townhomes, we have raised beds producing enough vegetables to supply 100 families year-round. Dr. Webb completed her medical study documenting the garden's health impact. Hospital visits among participating seniors dropped 42%, saving an estimated $73,000 annually in emergency medical costs. Medicare administrators are now studying our model as a template for community health programs nationwide. Karen's fate was everything she deserved and more. Her real estate license was permanently revoked after the ethics investigation found egregious abuse of fiduciary duties for personal financial gain. The criminal mischief charges resulted in a $5,000 fine, 200 hours of community service, and 3 years probation that prohibits her from serving on any HOA board. The state environmental violations carried personal liability that devastated her already broken finances. Karen owed $47,000 in fines that couldn't be discharged in bankruptcy, plus restitution to the community for destroying protected environmental resources. Her husband's dental practice collapsed under the tax liens and negative publicity. They lost the McMansion in foreclosure and moved to a 1-bedroom apartment across town where Karen now works as an administrative assistant for $9 an hour. The civil lawsuit from seniors who were hospitalized during the garden crisis is still pending, but Karen's lawyer has already recommended settlement negotiations. She'll be paying for her cruelty for the next decade, but the real victory is what we built from the ashes of her tyranny. The annual Water Conservation Festival draws visitors from across Texas to see our sustainable community model. My water system has been featured in environmental magazines, and I've consulted on similar projects in 15 other subdivisions facing HOA environmental abuse. Most importantly, the seniors are thriving. Mrs. Patterson's diabetes is perfectly controlled with fresh vegetables supplementing her medication. Mr. Thompson lost 30 pounds and got off half his prescriptions. Mrs. Rodriguez, now 84, leads garden tours for visiting school groups and never stops talking about the electrician who saved our lives. Beverly Palmer was elected HOA president unanimously and transformed our subdivision into a showcase for environmental sustainability. We've won state awards for water conservation, community health initiatives, and innovative approaches to senior care. The Yayi, Sebastian Hayes Community Resilience Center, opened last month with funding from property value increases driven by our environmental improvements. The center offers free nutrition classes, cooking demonstrations with garden produce, and legal assistance for residents facing HOA abuse in neighboring subdivisions. Tom Henderson started a water systems consulting business that's booked solid for the next 2 years. Janet Morrison teaches seminars on HOA legal rights that have helped communities across Texas fight back against corrupt boards. As for me, I found something I didn't expect when I moved here 6 years ago, a real community worth fighting for. The sweet scent of basil and tomatoes mixes with the distant laughter of children playing in our chemical-free common areas. My monitoring systems still dutifully document every gallon collected and distributed, but now they're protecting abundance instead of defending against sabotage. This story went viral because it proves something important. Bullies only win when good people do nothing. But when communities organize, document everything, and fight back with facts and determination, even the most entrenched tyrants can be toppled.